Hello. Hello, friends. Welcome. It's Friday. Hope you're doing great. I found this neat little, I don't know, uh, article on forgetting 5 ways to improve learner retention and minimize the forgetting curve. Let me just make sure that I post it in here because I want you to check it out. Okay. All right. Anytime this wants to show me the chat so that I can, I just want to do live chat. There we go. All right. There. Okay. Okay. So the things I wanted to talk about today have everything to do with forgetting and how you can actually plan your learning so that forgetting is minimized. And let me first talk to you about the forgetting curve. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but I remember years back, and that's why I posted this little link to this blog, is because years back there was this image that went around, and it was of a pyramid. And basically at the top of the pyramid was lecturing, and how basically if you used this form of teaching, then people would quickly forget. They would only remember 5% of what they heard in the lecture. And then basically as the pyramid moved down, your retention increased because the bottom one was teaching somebody else how to do it. And as much as I like that oversimplification of how people retain information and remember things, I know that through research, that pyramid is kind of bunk because realistically, the best indication that somebody is going to actually remember something and retain it is if you are exposing them to it a number of times. Now, I'm going to see if you can guess how many times it actually will take. And we are certainly not hitting that target most of the time. Can you guess what it is? It's 7 times. 7 times. So first, let me talk to you about what it is, what the forgetting curve is and what it looks like. All right. So this is time. So how long basically the passing of time. And then this here is how much you remember. So as you can see over time, you forget. So up in here, this part is your learning event. So you start here, you don't know anything, and then you're learning for a while. And you're like, whoa, look at my retention. It's going up. Okay. This line indicates the end of the learning event and the beginning of the forgetting part, which is usually when you go back to work. So what's really interesting here is that usually the time when we really do the best measurement and our quiz and all that other jazz is we measure it at the very end when everybody's at the top of their game. But what happens then is, as you can see, is things quickly, sharply drop off. Now, there's a lot of things that contribute to this. It has sometimes very little to do with the way you taught somebody. Like I said, you have to have, the information has to be not repeated to you. You have to actively recall it. And that's why I think scenarios, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute, can actually be very helpful here. Now, the other thing that happens is, what is kind of a shame, is that when you are in a learning environment, let's say in a training room someplace, or some hotel room, conference room, your brain's trying to be super efficient, and as a beast, right? We're trying to remember things. You kind of create a whole picture of that memory. So you have things like the room color, the carpet texture, the smell of the room. All those things combine to create and encapsulate that memory. That's why studies have shown that students who study in green rooms, and if the exam is in the green room where they are tested, then the recall will actually be better. So one of the things that kind of is a shame then is that a lot of people are learning things away from where they're going to be applying things. But that's how scenarios can actually really help. Let me show you how. So this is same graph. So we've got the amount of stuff you can remember and recall. And this can be, this is subjective. Like, is it remembering names, or is it remembering processes? Is it remembering where to go to find something? All those things kind of fall in there. So it can vary, right? This is a very general kind of graph, but then we've got time. So Same thing. You start a learning event, then as you progress over time, your retention increases and you basically reach your max. And that's when we we give you a quiz and we say you're a rock star, and we go, okay, go back to work now and live long and prosper, right? Now, one of the things you can do is, let's say a week after somebody gets back on the job, you go, hey, hold it. Let's send you a contextual scenario question. So John's on the job and he's back in his environment. He has not thought about your training since he's gotten back because he has about 200 emails to go through. All of a sudden, in his email box, he gets a question. And it's a contextual scenario question. It says, hey, what would you do here? And it has everything to do with some of the things that were taught in here. It might be the exact same scenario questions you reviewed, but now John has to revisit them in his workplace, and he has to remember what he discussed here with the team. That's a good thing. He is remembering it on the job. He's remembering it in the context of his job as well, if these are well designed. And also, you're asking him to remember something and revisit it a second time, which is great. Remember, 7 times is key. So, a week later, John, here's another question. You know, we gave you that checklist, and it had like the 3 key things you should do when you're dealing with a difficult employee. Which ones have you been able to apply so far? John now has to think maybe back to think about, wow, there is a checklist. I remember that. Let's pull that out of that binder. Or what are those three things again? And maybe I've used one of those, or maybe I should use it this week. So it doesn't all have to be scenario-based questions, but it can be things like, hey, remember we talked about this concept? Which one did you find most useful? Or which one have you been enabled to actually apply? Or remember that toolkit we gave you for, running an excellent project? How's your team reacting? What's their favorite part? This gives you several huge advantages. One, every single time John has to go back and think and recall, maybe even open up that book in his own context. Wonderful. He's remembering. Hopefully you're giving him some feedback as he's replying to these things. They're not just like shootouts that he gets to ignore. But he's applying it in the context of his work. So he's making the connection and building that memory in the place where he's going to be applying it, which is awesome. 2, he's remembering things that he's done. So he's recalling it. That's awesome as well. And also what you can do is, the other piece that's really working for you here is that you're now taking, the training that you built with the assumption that all of this would be very relevant to somebody over here. You're now asking specific questions of whether they're actually able to not only use the tools that you shared, so are your tools good, but also, is this person who was sent off, let's say, on a week leadership course, and now they're in trainee mode, really, and application mode, are they being given the opportunities to apply that stuff? Because if they're not, that means that this doesn't necessarily need to change, but the liaisons you're creating with this department to support this person to apply needs to change, because otherwise this is a waste of time, right? So what happens is that this part is not only supporting the learner to apply and remember and internalize, it's also an indication for you of how well this is set up and how well the entire ecosystem is set up. Is it set up properly? So what's cool here is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. This doesn't have to be a whole separate build project. You can take a lot of things from here and then just repurpose them, and every couple of weeks just do a little touch so that this person can now go back and revisit and maybe give you some insight. Now think about it in the context of their work. So many awesome applications. So now also what happens is when you're thinking about your learning, you have to think about it this way. You have to think about it not just as it stops at the point of training, but how does it continue? How does it enable and continue to support the learner afterwards? So I hope that was helpful. Now, if you have any other questions about scenario design, space learning, I suggest you check out some of the great work is by Will Thalheimer, Dr. Will Thalheimer. He does a lot of great work with that. And also clarification of, the research that has been done into remembering. I think that article too that I've shared with you is actually also really good. They actually have some, they actually discuss the forgetting curve in there as far as I saw. And if you have any other questions or you want to submit a comment underneath the video about what you thought of this and if you found it helpful, and maybe how you are currently, what strategies you're using to help people remember and apply beyond the actual training course, and how you're creating those liaisons with people who are basically directly supporting your learners on the job to help them apply. So I hope you found this helpful, useful, and you have a wonderful weekend. And of course, I do these lives like every day now, including Saturday, Sunday. My weekend ones might be a little bit more cash and maybe on the beach, but I'm here. So if you have any questions, post them, and I hope to see you next time. Take care, friends. Bye.